and especially those families that have lost a loved one. I know we've got some questions about what are the steps that IMPD's already taken. I will review that, but then I also want to tell you some additional steps that we have been taking in the process and some new things that we have instituted today. First of all, steps taken by IMPD. We have what we call Police One training. It's a web-based training. We have sent out a 1-hour course for ambush awareness and preparation to all of our 1,600 plus officers. They're required to look at this, sign off that they have reviewed it. That went out, I believe, a week ago. We've had 5 law enforcement sensitive safety bulletins that we have sent to our officers regarding safety and preparations for their families and for themselves. That comes from our Criminal Intelligence Division. I have a couple examples here today. I can show you the heading, but the rest of it is law enforcement sensitive, so that has been covered. Also, I have sent a couple memos out reminding officers about safety of their family, having a plan in the event of an issue at your home in light of what happened to one of our officers, but also just safety and preparation in general for them and their family in case they're called to action one day and their family's left at home by themselves. That's always a concern for us in law enforcement. For our citizens, and I think that sometimes gets overlooked in these active shooter situations, there have been citizens that have been nearby. We have taken the time to train 9 of our officers in what is called the Alert Civilian Response to Active Shooter, and we will begin teaching that curriculum in the near future. I think it's also important to point out that earlier today I spoke with the Special Agent in charge of the FBI here in Central Indiana and also spoke to the Superintendent of State Police to ensure that our lines of communication are open and they know exactly how this major metropolitan police department is going to handle investigations moving forward. And then later today, the mayor and I will start drafting a memorandum not only to be sent to our officers, but also those departments that we work closely with throughout Central Indiana. Here's some additional steps that we've taken that you may not be familiar with. One is the memo that we sent out to the troops this morning in light of what happened in Baton Rouge. You have been given a copy of that. Another one will be sent later this evening. If you'd like a copy of that, you can have that as well. I am also at this time calling upon the citizens of Central Indiana, all citizens, that if they see any threats or hear any threats or statements being made against police officers or their families to notify us immediately. We're also asking that any social media postings calling for violence against police officers or their families to be forwarded to IMPD immediately. And Kendall will get you the number and also the chief's email address where that will be sent to if people have that information. This morning I have also instructed our intelligence unit and our new Data Intelligence Center to be the central repository for all threats towards our police officers and or their families. They will investigate each one of the threats that we receive, if any. If criminal charges are necessary, they will work with prosecutors to bring charges. If we cannot bring criminal charges, then we are going to call upon our partners in the community to go to those individuals, deal with those individuals that are angry in a peaceful way before we have violence or potential violence in our city. I think that's something that's going to be important for us as a community to realize that people have a freedom of speech, but anyone advocating violence is advocating something that is a path to nowhere. So with that said, I will certainly entertain any questions at this time.
How does IMPD ascertain as to whether or not there are any threats to this particular police department? Is that something you can discuss?
Well, I'll discuss it somewhat. I don't want to get into too much of the details, but obviously our federal partners, state partners, other local law enforcement, sometimes our officers will come across something and hear. A lot of times social media, but anytime we get a threat, we have to look at it. And one of the reasons I wanted to go to the intelligence unit is I've been doing this for nearly 30 years, and I can tell you that officers get threatened a lot of times. It's something you get used to as a police officer because you make so many arrests. But I've never seen in 30 years the level of violence towards officers and the amount of people that have condoned violence towards officers. That cannot be tolerated. It's still a small number of people in this nation, but at this time we are seeing 2 major American cities that quite frankly have been on lockdown. That is not good for us as a society. We're very pleased here in Indianapolis, however, that many of the individuals in the community are stepping up and supporting the police department, work hand in hand with us each and every day, and we hope that continues. We think that will continue, but remember, these type of violence can be perpetrated by just one or two individuals. That's why it's so important for us as a community to forward information when you see those types of threats. We say all the time, if you see something, say something about Homeland Security, about crime issues. We're asking for the same consideration for our officers' safety as well. Yeah, Jeremy.
Chief, you had an officer shot last night. You had an officer whose home was shot at last week. Can you speak about, the officers must be somewhat on edge, and then what's going on nationally, this has got to heighten their awareness and their vigilance and fear.
It is, and certainly that back-to-back is a concern for us, but the other concern, and if you remember, we've been talking about this for a while now, is over the last 3 years, we've had, I believe, 13, maybe 14 officers shot. We've had many more involved in deadly force confrontation. It's something that we're reviewing to see if we can ascertain if there's a way to mitigate some of that risk to our officers and citizens. But certainly in light of what's happened in Dallas and Baton Rouge and the two recent shootings at the officer's home, which is crossing a line, and I've said that before, that should never be crossed. Fortunately, because of work from the community, once again, that individual, and because of good police work, is in jail now, and thankfully the prosecutor has brought charges. We appreciate Mr. Curry's work. And then this incident last night was an officer trying to save a life of an individual. It was suicidal, that ended up being shot in the leg, and we're very grateful that he's stable and at home resting today.
Have you seen any videos with violent threats against IMPD?
I will say this, at this time we have received one threat that we believe is directed towards law enforcement in Central Indiana, most likely IMPD, and we're looking at that threat at this time.
Was that recent?
That was within the last week, yes, sir.
Chief, do you see that perhaps domestic terrorists, which is essentially what these people are becoming and doing, are adopting the tactics that they saw work either in Israel or Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iraq?
We don't know yet, and that's one of the things that we're intrigued by with Dallas and with Baton Rouge, is waiting to hear back from the local authorities and the federal authorities what tactics were used. Are these just individuals got angry and went out and bought a weapon, or did they really take time to really plan out the ambush and the attack? It's something we're going to be looking at closely. We made some changes over the weekend because we had a major event over the weekend. We'll have another major event this weekend. We'll make some additional changes as a result because of what we've learned from Dallas. We may make some additional changes because of what we learned from Baton Rouge, but I think it's too early to see if that's the situation. But it's something we're certainly concerned about, as individuals have gone to a level of violence we haven't seen before against police officers in their communities.
Without giving up any tradecraft, what can you tell us about ambush awareness that you are telling your officers? And I would assume it means more than keep your head on a swivel when you're driving through a neighborhood, because you have a number of locations around town that would perhaps need to be surveilled or hardened.
Well, Indianapolis, being a large city with so many events, there's two things we have to really look at. An officer on patrol arriving at a scene, but we also have to look at those major events that we have and how do we protect our officers as they're directing traffic, as they're providing security. Basically, I'm not going to get into too much of the details, but a lot of what we talk about scenario-based. Things that have happened in other departments, what we can learn from that, how we can adapt as police officers. And we'll be having a conversation tomorrow as we look at curriculum for in-service in the near future. Do we need to change that and augment some of that training as a result?
What is your message to those who may be, you mentioned threats, what is your message to those who may be sitting at home or talking with their friends or doing whatever and are thinking of a threat? What is your message to them?
Well, we're going to investigate fully, and if you do something, we're going to prosecute fully. But let me just say this to the citizens as a whole. In chaotic situations, as we're seeing in Dallas and we're seeing in Baton Rouge, the criminal element thrives. We can allow that to happen. In Indianapolis, we cannot allow that to happen in any other major city or any city in the United States. It's something that we're extremely concerned about, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, is that this uniform that I proudly wear and 1,643 officers proudly wear represents the city, what's best of the city, the norms and the rules that we have come together as a community. When an officer is attacked in the city, not only is that officer attacked, but the citizens that he or she serves are attacked as well. That's why I say during chaotic situations, the criminal element thrives.
And I would assume that in a situation like this, like we saw after earlier this week when the officer's house was shot, you would either reach reach out or entertain any friends you have in the community at this point, so it just doesn't look like IMPD stepping up and doing this on its own?
Right, it's something that we do, and I think we do very well here in the first 7 months. We've worked very hard to continue to establish those relationships that's been built over the years. Deputy Mayor Hampton has been very helpful as well. We've had individuals come in to do Chief for a Day where they see our use of force scenarios, they see how we utilize use of force, how we investigate use of force. We do that because we want people to hold us accountable, but we want them to understand the process and the painstaking process that a critical incident involves. So we think we have those partnerships. I think you saw that in Operation First Step, where we were out trying to arrest individuals that are causing violence and perpetuating violence in our community, but at the same time, we're helping over 30 individuals and their families that are left behind, either with food insecurity, mental health issues, that we're actively engaged in trying to help the community as well. It's a balance we want to have in the police department. As a result of that, I think we have more and more community members stepping up and willing to work hand in hand with the police department. And I really do want to thank those leaders in the community that have stepped up to really lend their voice to the outcry against violence towards police officers. That means a lot to everyone in IMPD that's wearing a uniform.